Welcome back. We're going to add authentication to our application today. In order to get started, we need to go to the Firebase console and enable authentication. And there is this page here. You can find it on the project shortcuts. And just go to the tab called Sign In Method. So here I already have enabled email and password authentication. You can pick any provider that you want. There's a bunch of third-party providers here if you would like to use those. But in this video, I'm just going to stick to email and password. So once you have enabled that, let's go into the code. We don't need to add any new NPM packages, but we do need to import the Firebase library for authentication. So if you write firebase/compat/auth, we get it here. Next up, just like with a Firestore database, we're also going to make an instance variable here. I'm just going to call it auth and give it a type firebase.authentication.auth like this. And right here it's going to say that it's not initialized in the constructor, so we're going to go ahead and do that. This .auth equals firebase.auth. And remember to add open and close parentheses here. So now we can go ahead and use this variable to call methods. So we're going to make 3 methods inside our Fire service here. And it's going to be for registering, for signing in, and for logging out again. So let's just minimize some of these functions so they don't distract us too much. We're going to make it down here. So I'm just going to call this one register. And the register is just going to call this .auth and then create user with email and password. And we're going to give this method 2 parameters here, email, which is a string, password, which is a string. And we're just going to pass into this method here, email, password. And we can see on the inlay hints here that we're passing them in the correct order. Next up, we have the method for signing in. So I'm just going to call it sign in. And since we need the exact same parameters as last time, I'll just copy them here. And this almost looks identical to what we just did before. This auth sign in with email and password. Email, password. And probably the easiest one is sign out. We don't need any parameters here. Just call this auth sign out. And right here, they all return promises. And since we don't really do anything with the promises, we're going to get this little warning here. For now, we're just going to leave it as it is. And inside of our constructor here, I'm going to make a call here. If we reference this auth, there is a method called onAuth state changed. The method that we're calling here adds an observer for changes to the user's sign-in state. So if we make a variable here called the user and then make a lambda expression, we see that a user is either a firebase.userType or null. So when the state of the authentication changes, so let's say that a user logs in using the method that we made it down here, this one here will automatically trigger. And once they sign out again, this one triggers as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if user, and then I'm going to call this get messages. And we don't need to check the type of user here because we know that if it is null, we don't go into the scope because then this expression is false. And if it is not null, it is a firebase.userType. So now we're ready to start using the methods we just created down here. If we just go into our HTML, we have the app component.html. It is a small file with a couple input fields. I'm gonna make a divider up here. So this is just a container. And then I'm gonna put the other stuff we created last time into another container. And then I'm just gonna say ng if fireservice.auth.current user. So if the user is signed in, we get the UI where we can get to send a message. And if the user is not signed in, then we have a login screen. So I'm just gonna add the same but opposite ng if directive up here. Fireservice auth.current user equals, or just loosely equals to undefined. You could also say loosely equals to null, because null and undefined, they loosely equals each other in TypeScript and JavaScript. And let's just go ahead and run this now. So I think we have it inside of this directory here, ng-serve. And just like we expect, we get a blank page here because the user is not signed in. So we're just going to make some fields for signing in. So first of all, an input field for the email. Let's just give this one an ng model. And then we'll make a variable called the username. And just make this a string equals to an empty string. Type email. And then make another one for password. ng model. Password. String. And the type here is a password. The attribute we're adding right here, type equals password, just blanks out all of the characters. And then just make a button for triggering. Sign in. And a button for registering. Sign up. And click this one. Fireservice. Sign in. Username, password. Pass these ones in. And we're gonna do the same procedure with our sign up here. Sign or register, I think we called it. I should probably be a little more consistent with my naming here. On the topic of naming, I think I'll just rename username to email. And register. Pass in email, pass in password. And I think I'll make a little header once the user is logged in. And it's going to say, hello, Fireservice auth current user email. Or welcome. So we can go ahead and open up the program now. We have a couple of fields now. This one, I'm just gonna add a placeholder real quick. Placeholder, email, placeholder, password. And then we're gonna add a breakpoint here. And now the application looks like this. So we're just gonna register first, and then we can see what's gonna happen here. Emails at email.dk, and then just some password here, sign up. And now it's gonna say welcome, email at email.dk. And we automatically get all of the data from the database, because when the auth state changed, we get all this stuff here because it's calling the get messages, right? I'm just gonna add a logout button. Just gonna do it inside of the H1 actually. Button log out. Or I should probably say sign out, just because we're going with the sign instead of log terminology here. Click Fireservice sign out. And let's go ahead and have a look now. So we're still logged in, right? Click this. Now we're logged out. And I think it was email@email.dk. And now we can use the sign in because we already registered, right? Welcome, email@email.dk. So the entire implementation of the authentication system took just a couple of minutes. And I think we should just take a look at the console here. So let's just refresh the page. And we can see the user we created here. And there's some information about the user. So like created and signed in as. And the user automatically gets an ID. And we have some things we can do with the user here because we are, of course, administrating everything. The credentials are actually being protected using hashing. So if we open this one up, we'll see that it's using hashing and salting. So to those of you who have ever been implementing an authentication system from scratch using JSON Web Tokens, where you are also hashing and salting things manually and issuing tokens and attaching tokens and all those things, this is going to be quite the alleviation for you. Because with just a couple of lines, you can essentially make that system work. So there is one last thing that we can add. So now that we do have authentication set up, I think it's important to go in and actually configure our rules to use our authentication. So the database Firestore right now accepts all requests. And we're not really interested in that. We're interested in the user being able to read and write if they are logged in. You might also say they should be able to read no matter what, but only write under some circumstances. But I'm just going to modify these rules so that they need to be logged in and authenticated in order to actually start reading and writing. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to write if request.auth.token is not null and request auth UID is not null. And now we can publish these changes. I think this is probably the easiest way to just get started with having a basic security setup. So we're not validating anything right here. We're just saying that you must be authenticated in order to read and write. But this is a very good start. This is going to be the end of the video on authentication. It's a short video, but again, it's also a very short procedure to set up authentication with Firebase. In the next video, we're going to start talking about file storage using Firebase.